this is Alpha Shade 19, and here I am to talk about which version of WoW is better. So, in my opinion, it's retail, just because you can level your talents without having to go to a class trainer. You can jump into dungeon groups without having to type forever in the chat to say, hey, I'm looking for a group, and then have nobody read it for like forever. Or make your own group by typing in the chat and then having to wait for people to read the chat to join your group forever. You know, I like being able to press one button and then just join a group from doing that. That's pretty nice. Also, the idea of paying money for paying in-game money for abilities is kind of crazy, considering the fact that, like in retail WoW, if I level up, I just get all the abilities that I was gonna get anyway by going to the trainer. The whole trainer system is dumb in Classic. There's absolutely no reason for a system to like that to exist. Like, you have to pay real in-game money to learn your abilities. That's absolutely crazy. That's crazy. I'm so glad they took that part out of it. Not to mention the fact that you also need to do the exact same thing to be able to get your professions leveled up. You have to go to a professions training. Classic WoW takes way more time for a person to put into the game. If you're leveling in Classic, it's gonna take like at least like a month or two, probably, maybe even 3, if you're a slow leveler like me. Especially if you're playing hardcore. But we're not here to talk about hardcore because hardcore is its own thing. And leveling in the non-hardcore, of course, takes a shorter amount of time because death does not delete your character. That being said, there are still a lot of things about retail WoW that I know. And part of it is the fact that the only way to experience the old content as a newer player would be to play in Classic WoW. That's the only way. You can say, oh, but retail has time walking. Time walking is abysmal. There is no reason for anybody to actually think time walking is good. First of all, let's say I make a new character in WoW and I'm leveling up. Now I want to select. Now I get to level 10, and I want to select the time walking campaign. Well, I select any time walking campaign that I want. For me personally, I would probably choose Wrath of the Lich King because that's my most that's the most intriguing expansion to me as a newish player. I started playing WoW back in 2022. You could say, well, why didn't you play like Wrath on the Classic era back, or on Wrath of the Lich King Classic when that came out? That came out around the same time. And to the people who say that, I say this. First of all, leveling in Classic, again, even Wrath Classic, was way harder and took way more time than leveling in retail. Not only that, but they also came out with Dragonflight at the exact same time as Wrath Classic. So I had to make a choice. Do I play an expansion that is coming out now for people like me who are picking up the game for the first time ever? Or do I play an expansion that came out 15 years ago that less people are going to play, that is going to theoretically potentially be less enjoyable for me to play because the content is so old and it's going to make me level slower? And I chose to play Dragonflight because I said, I want to see what it's like to play in my first WoW expansion ever and see what playing a WoW expansion is actually like. And to be honest, I wanted to play the retail version of that, even though Wrath Classic could have been my first expansion in the game, because it would have been the same idea. But I was like, let me play the current content because that's what I'm gonna want to do. That's what more people are gonna do. And I was right. More people did play the current content than Wrath Classic. But the only problem with not playing Wrath Classic is that now it doesn't exist anymore. So now if I do want to go back and play like Wrath of the Lich King content, I have to do it in retail. You can say, oh, that doesn't sound too bad. You can just do that on the side when you're not playing the current content. You can go ahead and play a time walking campaign with Wrath of the Lich King. And I would say, that sounds like a great idea. And it would be if, in time walking campaigns, you are allowed to do raids. Let's be real. What's the biggest reason people actually play World of Warcraft? Raiding. Raiding is the pinnacle World of Warcraft experience. If you don't at least do some raiding, you haven't played World of Warcraft. And I played through all the Dragonflight raids, which I thought were all very good, by the way. People didn't like Dragonflight because of the story, right? And the story after the first part was lackluster. Everything up to Vault of the Incarnates was actually really good. Dragonflight had a really good start to it. It had a lot of things that I liked about it. I liked the world exploration in Dragonflight. I liked the raid. Razageth was a cool villain when she was the villain, and I did like the story of Dragonflight up until that point. But after the first part of the story, everything in Dragonflight fell off, and that's the thing about um, retail is that retail is only as good as the current expansion. If you're trying to play time walking, you're not going to have a good time because of the fact that you can't do the raids if you're in a group that's leveling up. And even though there are sometimes event raids for time walking, like sometimes they'll do like Black Temple or whatever time walking event they want to do. And I've done a time walking raid before, and let me tell you, the experience was nowhere close to as fun as raiding Vault of the Incarnates, even though I got to do some of the old content. A lot of the old content is done in time walking, and time walking makes it so that you do less overall damage because they don't want to adjust the HP to make it so your character will have to do similar amounts of damage to a time walking dungeon mob or boss that you need to do to a current expansion boss or trash mob to be able to kill it. So a lot of times, time walking dungeons take about like 10 minutes because you clear the dungeon so fast. That, and if there's any like, say any like context, any like cutscenes in the dungeon, nobody is going to want you to watch those because of the fact that they all cleared the dungeon 10 years ago when content actually came out. So that's the problem with retail is that you have a lot of content that theoretically you new players should be able to play through that they realistically can't because their enjoyment of that content is dragged down by players who have already cleared all of this 10 to 15 years ago when it actually came out. And that's the problem. There's no way to play old content in retail unless you want to go ahead and play classic. So, in that case, Blizzard has done one thing. They've made classic relevant by making the old content in retail so inaccessible for new players. That's incredibly hard to actually enjoy. Time walking is terrible. Nothing about time walking is actually that good. The only thing that's good about time walking is that whenever you get into a new expansion, and you can't just do like the dungeons of the new expansion immediately because you don't have the gear for it, right? they allow you to do time walking dungeons to be able to get gear for the new dungeons that came out in this expansion, right? That's basically the only thing that's ever good about time walking is that yes, you do get to do some of the old content, but the reality is most people don't want to do the dungeons. Most people want to do raids, and it's still basically impossible to do old raids unless you're doing it for like a time walking event. And as I said, those aren't even that good anyway. The only time where I ever had a really fun time doing like a time walking event or raid was whenever they did some kind of Firelands event where you could like raid and take on like Ragnaros back in like the Cataclysm version of it, and then at least for the Firelands time walking event, that was kind of cool. But usually it's not like that. Usually it's just something where it'll be content that like hardly anyone actually realistically wants to do anymore at all. And that's the thing, is that you need to go back to classic to be able to enjoy any of the old content because that's the only place where everybody actually wants to do that. And I think that's the thing, that for some people they're gonna like classic better. For others, they're gonna like retail better. For me, as a kind of newer player, I think that overall the better game is retail. Like I said, try having to pay gold for abilities or like just overall in-game money for abilities by having a class trainer is dumb. The amount of damage that you can do is basically capped out at like what like 400 or 500 DPS, like at maximum in classic WoW, and that's just not very fun to look at. Nowadays in retail, I think the damage is too high, but I mean it looks better. It does. Like in War Within, you see a lot of the top players doing like a million DPS to a boss, and it's like that's a lot cooler than doing I don't know 500. If there was like a kind of happy medium between the 500 and a million DPS to the boss, and I think that would be great. I think a million is kind of high. I think it's a bit dumb. I think the loot system in Classic is better. The fact that there was like a bunch of different things that you could get, and it wasn't all just one single reskin of like the same item, right? Because in retail now and raids, you only get like one item that ever drops. But depending on what like type of raid you're in, like LFR, normal, heroic, or mythic, it's a higher item level, and that's the only difference. It's the same name of item, it's just a higher item level. In classic, you would have different items that would drop, and you would have to look for the exact specific one that you needed. In retail, that's not how it is. Nowadays, items just drop, and it's expected that eventually you're going to get the one that you need, right? Like the items that drop might not be for your class in a specific fight, but there's usually at least something for your class in a fight that drops because it's very unlikely that you're going to go through an entire raid and get no gear. Um, that being said, I still think that another thing that makes retail a little bit more interesting than classic is the fact that raids and dungeons actually take like way more skill to actually pull off and clear in retail than they do in classic. A lot of classic WoW bosses can be beaten by simply just doing one or two mechanics correctly and then DPSing the boss down to be able to beat it. And that's it. In retail WoW, look at the current raid, right? I don't even know what it's called. I've cleared it like 2 or 3 times on normal, and I have no idea what it's called. I think it's like I don't want to guess. I know the final boss name though, right? Look at, like, for example, Ragnaros, like the original classic WoW fight against Ragnaros, like has like what, one or two mechanics. Now we have Queen Ansurek, who has like 4 or 5 mechanics in just phase one, and then has multiple phase. Like there were no multiple phase boss fights in classic. I mean, I guess technically there was with the guy in Scarlet Monastery. I don't even know what his name was. Yeah, Morgraine. Yeah, technically Morgraine is what, a two-stage boss fight. But his only like real mechanic is the fact that he gets revived uh by his wife or whatever, whoever Whitemane was to him. I don't know. And then you have to kill him again. But even then, it's just like most of that boss fight is still standing and hitting anyway. So yeah, that there's that. That and there's not really that much to do in classic WoW. You pretty much have like what, once you reach level. Okay, so it takes like 3 months to reach level 60 to level your character, and then after that you need to do dungeons and raids until you get your bis. But once you get your bis, that's it. The game's done. It's over. And I mean, I guess it's the way that World of Warcraft always is. But the thing is, in retail WoW, there's always going to be the next part of the game. There's going to be um, there's going to be a new raid. There's going to be, you know, uh, more stuff to do in the next season. You have the PvP in retail is far better than the PvP in classic. Classic PvP takes like classic PvP. I mean, personally, I don't even really understand PvP either in retail or classic, but classic PvP is easier to understand because the HP bars go down way faster in classic than in retail. And that's just because people have less HP in classic overall than retail, right? But you can get a much longer PvP experience in retail, and I don't know whether that's good or bad actually. I was thinking that would be good, but maybe it's bad because I mean I personally feel like games of PvP and WoW shouldn't even last that long, so maybe the classic version is better there. But overall, it just depends on what type of gaming experience you're really looking for. If you're looking for an experience where you're in it for mostly the nostalgia, or if you're a new player and you want to do some of the old content in WoW, then Classic WoW is better for you, especially if you don't have to deal with bosses that have like 45 different mechanics that y'all have to look out for. What, like 2 or 3 of which is like a one-shot mechanic that will kill the entire raid. If you don't have to deal with that, then maybe Classic WoW is for you. If you don't mind dealing with that, you like a bit of a challenge, you can play retail WoW, or go ahead and play Classic Hardcore. That's the thing. There's so many different versions of the game now that like it makes it hard for people to keep up with. Like you even have Cataclysm Classic, which I would not recommend anybody play because like why the heck would you do that? It's one of the weaker expansions. It's not going to help you as a newer player to understand the game at all. And let's be real, if you can play Classic, like Vanilla Classic or Classic Cataclysm, you might as well just play Vanilla Classic because that's where more players are going to be anyway. So there's that. I think both versions of the game, Classic and Retail, have their ups and their downs. But to me, Retail is better just because there's more stuff to do. But if you want to experience the old content of the game, you pretty much have to play Classic because Retail doesn't give new players a good experience of the old content. In fact, it gives a very shoddy experience of the old content. and does not do it justice because the experience is so different from what it would have been back then. So if you want to play old content and feel like you're actually playing content that is actually fun and enjoyable and is still a challenge, you have to play um, classic because if you play the old content in retail, you probably will be able to solo the entire raid or dungeon yourself because of the fact that the old content is just so easy unless you're doing it through time walking that you can literally just one shot everything on a level 80 character right now. So personally, I think retail is better just because the game flows better. The character can level up faster. You have more content to just go through overall. Um, the leveling systems, such as leveling your abilities and stuff, is way better. You don't have to spend like any gold on abilities for the leveling up, which is way better than having to go to a class trainer and spending gold and then getting your abilities and then figuring out exactly where to put those abilities. Also, not to mention the fact that like the skill trees are a lot better in retail than classic. The skill trees make more sense in retail than they do in classic, and they're organized better in retail than they are in classic. Um, and to me, that just like the systems overall, the quality of life changes overall make the retail experience better. Now, in terms of being a new player, I think that classic is better because it allows you to actually play, not necessarily all the classes that you would want to play as. Like for me, I have to play retail if I want to play my Death Knight. Like I can't play Death Knight in Classic because it didn't exist. So the other thing is like if you like Death Knight or if you like what's the other one? Demon Hunter or some of the other or Evoker, right? If you want to be able to play any one of those classes, you have to play retail because none of those classes existed back in Classic. And there's probably a couple more that I could talk about too. But that's the thing is there's limitations on classic classes. You couldn't play a paladin if you were on horde. You can't play a shaman if you're on alliance. I mean, I think just having the ability to play whatever class you want to choose on both sides of the game, horde or alliance, also makes the game a lot better because let's say if I wanted to play a paladin on horde, I can't play a paladin on horde if I'm not playing in retail. If I'm playing in classic, the best thing I'd be able to do is play a shaman, right? And personally, I've tried playing shaman in classic. I do not enjoy it. Right? I enjoyed paladin enough to play all the way to level 60 inside on the paladin. Just to realize that playing paladin in classic WoW is probably one of the worst experiences I've ever had. Even though it was sodden, getting some of the runes made it a little bit better. But yeah, that's my take. I personally think that for new players, classic is better. For people that are like me, playing retail for a couple of years now, maybe retail is better. I think overall, if you want, again, like I'm saying, if you want to experience the old content, go ahead, play classic, and then maybe eventually, if you want to get back into the game and play the new content, then you play retail. It just depends on what kind of player you are realistically, whether you're gonna like retail or classic better. There are parts of both that are good. There are parts of both that are bad. The community overall is kind of annoying. But that's just something you have to deal with in every game. As a person who's played a league for over freaking 7 years now, I'm Dealing with the WoW community is a lot easier than dealing with the League community. I'll tell you that. The League community is far worse. People just don't understand how how bad the League community really is. In terms of toxicity, the League community is far worse than the WoW community. Far worse. But I'm not here to talk about that. We can talk about that in a different video. This has been my video on this topic. If you like the video, give it a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.